They called me useless, a placeholder they'd soon erase. But they forgot quiet doesn't mean weak. And when the storm hit, I was the one holding the match. The apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, a sound I'd never noticed until tonight. It was late past midnight, March 2025, and I, Nathan Hayes, sat on my worn leather couch, phone walleted in my hands. My fingers felt cold against its edges, like they knew something I didn't. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. His patience wasn't naivety, it was calculation. A text had pinged an hour ago from Ethan, the 24-year-old junior analyst I'd taken under my wing 3 years back. "I thought you should see this before Monday," it read. No context, just a video attachment. I pressed play. The screen flickered to life. And this, he was Michael Reynolds, my boss of 20 years, standing in the middle of the company's annual staff party. Behind every backslap and fake cheer, he caught the glances they thought he'd miss. Each quiet nod masked a mind racing 3 steps ahead. His gray suit was rumpled. A whiskey glass glinted in his hand, and his voice that unmistakable baritone. I'd heard bark orders and dodge blame for 2 decades sliced through the chatter. "Nathan's such a worthless dumbass," he said, a grin splitting his face. "Next month we're getting rid of he won't even see it coming." His patience wasn't naivety, it was calculation. And when they laughed, they had no clue their empire was already cracking. The crowd around him, my coworkers, people I'd shared coffee runs and late-night deadlines with, reacted in a ripple. Some chuckled nervous, and sharp others' shifted eyes darting away. No one said a word in my defense. I stared at the screen, the 30-second clip looping before I could stop it. My chest tightened, a sharp acidic burn creeping up my throat. Each quiet nod masked a mind racing 3 steps ahead. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. 20 years at Reynolds and Carter Consulting flashed behind my eyes. Long nights, hunched over spreadsheets, missed birthdays with my sister's kids' weekends, spent polishing reports so Michael could strut into client meetings, looking like a genius. I'd covered for his mistakes, smoothed over his drunken rants at conferences, even defended him when whispers of his incompetence grew too loud. And this was my reward. And when they laughed, they had no clue their empire was already cracking. Behind every backslap and fake cheer, he caught the glances they thought he'd miss. A punchline delivered to a room full of laughter. I replayed it, forcing myself to listen again. "He won't even see it coming." His arrogance dripped from every syllable, thick and smug. My hands shook, not with fear, but with something hotter, something that clawed its way up from the pit of my stomach. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. His patience wasn't naivety, it was calculation. Rage, humiliation, and then beneath it all, a spark, cold, clear, and unyielding. Determination. Michael thought I was naive, a loyal dog, too dumb to bite back. He was wrong, dead wrong. By the time the video looped a 3rd time, I wasn't just watching my betrayal. I was planning his ruin. The audience he'd played to would see a different show soon enough, and I'd be the one holding the spotlight. Behind every backslap and fake cheer, he caught the glances they thought he'd miss. Each quiet nod masked a mind racing 3 steps ahead. I didn't sleep that night. The bedroom was a cave of shadows, the ceiling stretching above me like a blank slate for my racing mind. I lay this still in my sweats. The phone discarded on the nightstand like a live wire I couldn't touch again. Michael's voice echoed in my skull. "Worthless dumbass." Each word a splinter under my skin. And when they laughed, they had no clue their empire was already cracking. 20 years I'd given Reynolds and Carter everything. Every late night, every canceled plan. Every time I'd bitten my tongue when he took credit for my work. I'd saved his ass more times than I could count, and he'd turned me into a joke. My eyes traced the cracks in the plaster, and something shifted inside me. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. The hurt was still this raw and jagged, but it was hardening into something else. I thought of every report I'd rewritten for him, every client I'd charmed while he fumbled. He wasn't the mastermind he pretended to be. I was. And he just handed me the match to burn his house down. By the time the first gray light slipped through the blinds, I'd made up my mind. If Michael thought I'd go quietly, if he believed I'd shuffle into Monday oblivious to his knife, he was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. I didn't need sleep. I needed a plan. And as the clock ticked toward dawn, I felt the first threads of it weaving together, tight, deliberate, and sharp enough to cut. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. I walked into Reynolds and Carter at 7:55 a.m., same as always. The office buzzed with its usual Monday hum, phones, ringing keyboards, clacking, the faint smell of burnt coffee hanging in the air like a bad omen. My heartbeat was steady, my face a mask of calm I'd perfected over years of swallowing Michael's nonsense. I dressed sharp black blazer, crisp white shirt, because today wasn't just another's day. It was the start of the game. Michael's office door was wide open, a beacon of arrogance. He leaned back in his chair laughing with James, the 50-year-old CFO, who'd always been too eager to kiss the ring. I paused in the doorway, letting my shadow fall across the carpet. "Morning, Michael." I said, my voice polite, a smile curling just enough to look routine. His eyes flicked to me, and for a split second I saw it. Something beneath his grin. Not guilt, not hesitation, but smugness thick as the whiskey he'd held Saturday night. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. "Good weekend?" he asked, his tone light, like he hadn't mocked me to a crowd 48 hours ago. I nodded, meeting his gaze. "Great weekend. Feeling refreed for another's productive month." His smirk widened, a predator sure of his prey. "That's what I like to hear," he said, leaning forward slightly, as if daring me to flinch. I didn't. I turned, walked to my desk, and sat down, the weight of his ignorance settling over me like a cloak. He thought he had me cornered, a lamb waiting for the slaughter. He had no idea I'd already sharpened the knife. The office pulsed around me, interns shuffling papers, the copier wheezing in the corner. But my mind was elsewhere. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. I opened my laptop, fingers hovering over the keys, and let the facade lock into place. For now, I'd play the part. Loyal Nathan, clueless and compliant. But beneath it, I was already moving pieces he couldn't see. If he thought I'd blindly walk into my own execution, he didn't know me at all. I glanced at his office again, his laughter drifting out like a taunt. "Enjoy it, Michael," I thought. "It's the last time you'll laugh on my dime." The game had begun, and I was 3 steps ahead before he'd even rolled the dice. The next 4 weeks were a performance, every move rehearsed to perfection. I walked into Reynolds and Carter each morning with the same composed smile, my shoes clicking against the tile like a metronome counting down Michael's days. The office hummed around me, phones trilling the printer's endless whine. But I was a ghost in the chaos, playing the role of the perfect employee. I nodded in meetings, offered solutions with just the right amount of enthusiasm, and took on extra work without a flicker of complaint. Late nights became my sanctuary. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. The fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as I stayed past the others' fingers flying over my keyboard. But I wasn't polishing reports for Michael anymore. I was collecting emails piled up in a hidden folder. Every careless directive he'd sent, every backhanded compliment buried in a thread. Contracts followed ones I'd drafted or salvaged, each a testament to the work he'd claimed as his own. Financial reports, too. sloppy numbers James had signed off on, gaps I'd quietly filled for years. Most wouldn't think twice about these scraps, but I did. I thought twice about everything. Beneath the surface, I was building a net to drag Michael down thread by thread. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. And it wasn't just paper I gathered. I reached out to old clients, the ones who'd stayed loyal to me, not him. Casual calls a subtle hint. I'm considering new opportunities. Their responses were immediate, eager. Nathan, we'd follow you anywhere. I smiled into the receiver, filing their trust away for later. Then this was the attorney, a sharp-eyed man named Claire, mid-30s, who met me over coffee downtown. I laid out the groundwork. Severance clauses, non-competes, the legal edges I could dance along. He nodded, pen-tapping his notepad. You've got options, he said. Play this right and he'll feel it where it hurts. I left with his card and a plan taking shape. The final piece clicked when I dialed Pierce & Associates, a competitor that had been sniffing around Reynolds and Carter for months. Their VP, a clipped voice named Laura, didn't hesitate. We've heard about you, Nathan. Let's talk. I hung up, staring at the city lights beyond my window. Michael's whiskey-soaked laugh from that video looped in my mind, fueling every step. I wasn't just leaving. I was taking everything he took for granted with me. Clients, credibility, control. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. 4 weeks of smiling through the lie, and I was ready to pull the first string. The morning of my final day broke gray and heavy, the air thick with a tension only I could feel. I arrived at Reynolds and Carter early before the sun had fully risen, my laptop bag slung over my shoulder like a weapon. The office was quiet, just the hum of the HVAC and the faint drip of the coffee machine. Behind every backslap and fake cheer, he caught the glances they thought he'd miss. I settled at my desk, watching the minutes tick toward the end game. Across the floor, Michael's office glowed. He was in this laughing with James again, their voices carrying like they owned the world. Oblivious, arrogant. I let my gaze linger, a polite smile fixed on my face, masking the storm brewing beneath. The day crawled forward normally, a thin veneer over the shift I sensed coming. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. I answered emails, nodded at coworkers, kept my posture relaxed, even as my pulse thummed. At 3:00 p.m., the door to Michael's office swung wider, and Rachel from HR stepped inside, his face carefully neutral. He didn't glance my way, but I knew. My phone stayed silent, a coiled snake waiting to strike. Then at 3:30 it lit up. Michael Reynolds, please come to my office. The summons I'd anticipated for weeks. I exhaled slowly, smoothing my blow with steady hands. This wasn't a surprise. It was a stage, and I'd memorized my lines. I stood feeling the weight of 20 years' shift. Not a burden anymore, but a lever. Michael thought he'd catch me off guard, call me in with some rehearsed speech about budgets and restructuring. He had no idea I was already 3 steps ahead. The trap set and waiting. I crossed the floor, shoes clicking. Showtime. I knocked on Michael's door, stepping inside with the same polite smile I'd worn all month. The office smelled of leather and stale ambition. Rachel seated across from him with a company-issued folder in front of his. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. Standard HR protocol, a scene I'd witnessed from the other side. Too many times. Michael put on his best fake sympathy, leaning back in his chair like a king granting an audience. Nathan, please have a seat, he said, voice measured, scripted. I sat, folding my hands in my lap, meeting his gaze without a flicker. We appreciate your dedication to the company over the last 20 years. He began, the words hollow as they rolled off his tongue. But as you know, the industry is evolving, and we've had to make some difficult decisions regarding staffing. Rachel stayed silent, his eyes on the folder. We've decided to restructure your role, he continued. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. And unfortunately, your position is being phased out. He slid the folder across the table, a severance package wrapped in corporate courtesy. I didn't touch it. We want to ensure a smooth transition, he added, watching me. He expected tears, anger, confusion, something to feed his ego. Instead, I smiled soft and steady. I understand, I said. He blinked, a flicker of hesitation crossing his face. Too easy, too clean. He cleared his throat. We'll need your company laptop and access badge before the end of the day, and of course a non-disclosure agreement regarding operations. I nodded, still calm. They wanted me quiet, a ghost fading without a whisper. Then he leaned forward, voice dropping into false warmth. I know this must be difficult, but you're talented, Nathan. I'm sure you'll land on your feet. I tilted my head just enough to unsettle him. Oh, I know I will. I said, my tone smooth as glass. His relief flashed brief, misplaced, before I stood picking up the folder with that same smile. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. I walked out, the weight of 20 years lifting off my shoulders. Not his victory, but mine. Now I was free to burn it all down. Back at my desk, the clock ticked toward 5:00 p.m. My final hours as an employee slipping away. I moved with purpose, archiving every email, every project file, every client contract I could touch, all perfectly legal while I still had access. The office buzzed with its usual end-of-day chatter. Co-workers oblivious to the fuse I was lighting. I opened a new email, addressed it to Thomas Bennett, our biggest client, the one who'd made up 40% of our revenue for a decade. My fingers hovered, then typed, "Hi, Thomas. I wanted to thank you for your partnership over the years." The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. Given my upcoming departure from Reynolds and Carter, I'll be available for consulting in the near future. Would love to discuss how I can continue assisting your company. Let me know if you'd like to set up a call. I hit send. I packed my things, pens, a photo of my niece, the laptop I'd surrender, smiling at coworkers with polite goodbyes. Just another employee leaving. At 5:00 sharp, I walked out, the glass doors hissing shut behind me. I didn't look back. Michael had no idea what I'd just unleashed, but he'd feel it soon enough. The morning after my departure, I woke to my phone buzzing against the nightstand, the sound sharp in the stillness of my apartment. I checked the screen. 3 missed calls from Reynolds and Carter by 10:00 a.m., all unknown extensions, but I knew who they traced back to. I leaned back against my pillows, a slow smile forming as I let the 4th call ring out. Daniel thought he could contain this, that a few days would pass before the fallout hit. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. He'd misjudged me again, and his arrogance was speeding up the clock. By noon, a text from Ethan buzzed through. "Nathan, whatever you did, the office is in full meltdown mode. Thomas pulled out of his contract. Michael's losing it." I laughed out loud, the sound echoing off the bare walls. Thomas Bennett, the client I'd emailed on my way out, had seen the writing on the wall. No Nathan, no stability, no reason to stay. At 2:30 p.m., my phone lit up again, this time with a name. Michael Reynolds. I answered, keeping my tone calm, almost bored. "Hello." A sharp exhale crackled through the line, then his voice tight and controlled. "Nathan, I just heard about Thomas. He mentioned you reached out." I let the silence stretch, savoring his unease. "I did," I said simply. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. A beat of quiet, then he forced a chuckle. The sound brittle. "Listen, I think this has been some miscommunication. This was just office banter. You know that. I cut in my voice dangerously light. I don't hold grudges, Michael. I just make smart decisions. His breathing tightened a faint hitch I could almost feel through the phone. Are you working for someone else? He pressed, desperation creeping in. I smiled, twirling a pen between my fingers. I don't see how that's relevant to you. He cursed under his breath, and I hung up the click, a punctuation mark on his dawning panic. Thomas had made a smart decision too, and Michael was only beginning to realize how bad his mistake had been. That afternoon, I stepped into Pearson Associates' downtown office. The sleek glass walls a stark contrast to the dated clutter of Reynolds and Carter. David Pierce, the 52-year-old CEO, greeted me with a firm handshake, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Nathan, he said, leading me to a conference room. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. The moment I heard you were leaving, I had my team watching. Michelle's ship is sinking. I gave him a knowing smile, settling into a leather chair as he leaned forward, elbows on the table. And you want to take advantage of that, I said. He smirked. I want us both to win. I pulled a file from my bag. Projections I'd built from memory client renewals. I'd tracked weaknesses in Michael's contracts I'd exploited for years to keep them afloat. I slid it across the table. If you want to take them down, start here. David flipped through the pages, his expression darkening with satisfaction as he scanned the numbers, the names, the leverage I'd handed him. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. This is gold, he muttered, then looked up. I assume you're not giving this away for free? I smiled, leaning back. No, I'm not. His grin widened, a predator recognizing another's. Let's talk terms. By the time I left, the deal was sealed. I wasn't just joining Pierce. I was bringing Michael's clients with me, a migration he'd feel like a gut punch. The file was my opening salvo. But the real blow would land when those contracts started bleeding out of his grasp. Michael was about to realize what true panic felt like, and I'd be watching from the other side of the battlefield, coffee in hand. Monday morning, I sat in my new office at Pierce, a corner space with a view of the skyline. When Ethan's next text buzzed through at 8:15. Holy hell, Nathan. Michael just stormed into the main office. He looks like he hasn't slept. I swear he's about to combust. I smirked, picturing him unraveling tie, a skew voice cracking as he barked at underlings. The first wave had hit. 3 major clients, ones I'd nursed through a decade of Michael's fumbles, had sent termination notices before the doors even opened. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. Pierce had moved faster than Michael could have anticipated, and I was the architect of it all. By 9 Huzru, the cracks were fractures. James had locked himself in his office, crunching numbers to tally the damage, while legal scrambled for loopholes to trap the fleeing clients. Michael, though, was on the phones, his voice, as he begged executives to stay. Pleas that fell on ears already tuned to my quiet promises. At noon, he called me again, his tone strained on edge. Nathan, he snapped. I don't know what you've been telling people, but we have a serious problem. I arched an eyebrow, though he couldn't see it. Oh, what kind of problem? He exhaled sharply. You know damn well what kind. Thomas is gone, and now 3 others' accounts have pulled out millions in revenue overnight. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. Did you? He stopped, unwilling to say it. I let the silence drag, then spoke calm and careful. I don't work for Reynolds and Carter anymore. Michael, what happens to your company isn't my concern. A beat of silence, then his voice turned sharp. You're working for Pierce, aren't you? I smiled. I don't see how that's relevant to you. He cursed louder this time, and I could almost see him gripping his desk power, slipping through his fingers. This industry is small, Nathan. You don't want to burn bridges. I let out a small laugh, cold and deliberate. You burned that bridge the moment you called me a worthless dumbass in front of the entire company. He went quiet, and I hung up. The fear in his silence sweeter than any apology. By 3 p.m., Ethan texted again. Emergency board meeting just called. Investors are freaking out. Talk of replacing Michael. I leaned back, satisfaction rolling through me. He'd hidden behind my work for years, but now the ugly truth was bare, and it was killing him faster than he could scream. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. Tuesday morning, I walked into Reynolds and Carter, not as an employee, but as a warning. The office was a graveyard of tension. The usual chatter replaced by whispers behind screens, quick glances darting my way. I crossed the floor, shoes echoing until I reached Michael's office. I knocked, and his gruff "come in" rasped through the door. I stepped inside, closing it behind me. He sat at his desk, tie loosened, dark circles bruising his eyes, his arrogance stripped bare. I took a seat across from him, mirroring our firing scene a week ago, and tilted my head. "How's it going, Michael?" I asked, voice light, his jaw clenched, a muscle twitching. "Cut the crap, Nathan." The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. "What do you want?" I smiled, letting the question hang. "Me? I just wanted to see how you were doing." He let out a bitter laugh, the sound scraping the air. "Oh, you know how I'm doing." I did. He took a deep breath, leaning forward. "Look, if this is a way to fix this, to make it right. What would it take?" The desperation in his voice was thick, a surrender I'd waited for. I leaned in, voice soft but firm. "There's no fixing this, Michael." His expression hardened, but his eyes flickered with defeat. I stood smoothing my blazer. "Enjoy unemployment," I said, turning to leave. Before I walked out, I glanced back, delivering the final cut he'd never expected. And then I was gone, leaving him in the ruins he'd built. By Friday, the headlines hit like a thunderclap, plastering Michael's ruin across every screen I scrolled past. Major client exodus at Reynolds, and Carter's CEO under fire, blared one. Pierce and Associates acquires key clients in strategic move, crowed another's. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. I sat in my new office at Pierce, sipping coffee. The bitter brew a perfect match for the satisfaction curling through me. The empire Michael had built on my sweat and his swagger was crumbling into dust, and the world was watching. At 10 a.m., Ethan's text buzzed through. "Nathan, you're not going to believe this. Emergency investor meeting. Rumor is they're forcing Michael out." I leaned back, smiling to myself. Right on schedule. At 3:00 p.m., the internal email from Reynolds and Carter confirmed it. Effective immediately, Michael Reynolds has stepped down as CEO. An interim leadership team will be announced soon. I read it twice, letting the words sink in. Fired, publicly humiliated, gone. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. Then at 5:30, my inbox pinged again. Subject: let's talk, from Michael himself. I opened it, his desperation spilling out. "Nathan, things have gotten out of control. I know you're behind this. Let's meet. Put this behind us." Predictable. Pathetic. I typed back, fingers steady. "Michael, this is nothing to discuss. This isn't fixable. Enjoy your weekend." I hit send, closing the last chapter of his career with a click. He was finished, and I was just getting started. Monday morning, I stepped into Pearson Associates headquarters as their newest senior partner. The title earned not by graveling, but by proving I was the best. David greeted me in the executive lounge, his handshake firm. "Welcome aboard, Nathan," he said. "From what I hear, you've already made quite an impact." I smiled, feeling the weight of possibility settle over me. I like to be efficient, he chuckled. Exactly what we need. This wasn't just a job, it was a fresh start built on my terms. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. That afternoon, my assistant knocked hesitantly. Nathan, you have a visitor, Michael Reynolds. I raised an eyebrow, then nodded. Send him in. He shuffled through the door, a shadow of the man he'd been. No suit, no smirk, just tired eyes and a drawn face. You really did it, huh? He muttered, voice hollow. I tilted my head. You destroyed yourself, Michael. He exhaled sharply. I need a job. I stood meeting his gaze with a cold smile. You don't need a job. You need a lesson. I turned back to my desk, dismissing him without another's word. That night I sat by the window, wine in hand, the city skyline glittering below. I win, I whispered. The tension in the room crackled, but Nathan's eyes stayed sharp. The words, a quiet toast to the future, I'd claimed.